Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a slightly different kind of arena, a world where the roar of the crowd is just as loud, the passion just as fierce, but something crucial is missing from the air, or is it? Imagine you're there, the lights of a colossal stadium blazing against the night sky, the air thick with anticipation for the championship game. But there are no betting slips clutched in anxious hands, no odds flashing on screens, no talk of point spreads. Tonight, we explore a reality where spectator sports thrive, but without any fan wagers placed. Would they still have that thrilling edge? You probably won't survive this thought experiment without questioning everything you thought you knew about why sports get your heart pounding. It's a real game changer, if you'll pardon the pun. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing our global huddle. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself swept along in a river of humanity, a vibrant current of team colors, painted faces, and a palpable, almost crackling sense of anticipation. Above you, the colossal structure of the city's grand stadium looms, a modern-day coliseum lit against the deepening twilight, promising an evening of drama, skill, and raw human emotion. The air thrums with the bass beat of pre-game music, the excited chatter of thousands, the distant, rhythmic chants of early arrivals already staking their vocal claim within. It's game night, championship night no less. And yet, as you soak in this familiar pre-spectacle buzz, you begin to notice the subtle absences, the quiet deviations from a script you thought you knew by heart. There are no hurried conversations about the line or last-minute changes in the odds. No one is anxiously refreshing an app on their phone to check the latest betting market movements. The kiosks that, in another reality, might be dispensing betting slips or touting expert picks are here perhaps selling beautifully designed team programs, artisanal local snacks, or interactive souvenir lanyards that light up in your team's colors. The only spread people seem concerned about is the one on the halftime gourmet hot dog offering, which, you note with a wry smile, still costs about the same as a small plot of land in a less exciting part of the country. Some universal constants, it seems, transcend even the absence of gambling. So, what are these silent stakes that have drawn these thousands of souls together tonight, if not the tantalizing possibility of a financial windfall? As you look around, you see it reflected in their eyes, in the passionate set of their jaws, in the way they clutch their team scarves like sacred relics. It's unadulterated team loyalty, a fierce, often irrational, but deeply felt connection to a chosen tribe. It's local pride, the honor of their city or region being contested on that floodlit field. It's a pure appreciation for the beauty of the sport itself, the skill, the strategy, the breathtaking displays of athleticism. It's the innate human love for the drama of competition, the unfolding narrative of effort, struggle, and potential triumph or heartbreak. And perhaps most importantly, it's the desire for a shared experience, a sense of belonging, a chance to lose oneself in a collective wave of emotion with thousands of like-minded spirits. The most intense argument you overhear on your way to your seat isn't about a bad beat or a sure thing that didn't pan out, but a surprisingly sophisticated, deeply philosophical debate between two fans about whether their team's new mascot, a surprisingly dignified-looking badger named Brenda, truly captures the spiritual essence of their historical rivalry with the team from Oakhaven, whose mascot is, for reasons no one quite understands, a gently melancholic kumquat. Does this atmosphere, stripped bare of the often frantic, sometimes mercenary energy of betting, feel purer, more focused, or is there an essential ingredient missing from the usual pregame buzz, a certain sharp, nervous edge that only a personal financial stake can provide? It's a fascinating question. Sports psychologists and sociologists, your internal academic narrator, clearly already warming up on the sidelines with a tiny clipboard, thoughtfully interjects, still argue whether the primary appeal of spectator sports lies in deep-seated mechanisms like vicarious achievement, tribal identification, and the cathartic release of shared emotion, or if external factors, such as the social facilitation of being in a large, excited crowd, or indeed the added frisson of a personal stake. Through wagering, are more significant drivers of intense, passionate engagement. Tonight, you are in a living laboratory designed to test that very proposition. The expression of fandom here is vibrant, unrestrained. Team colors are everywhere. A sea of painted faces, elaborately designed homemade banners proclaiming undying allegiance, and costumes that range from the cleverly witty to the frankly bewildering. The chants are just as loud, the pre-game rituals just as fervent. Perhaps, in this world, without the distraction or alternative focus of betting, these pure expressions of fan loyalty have become even more elaborate, more central to the experience. You see a group of fans engaged in what appears to be a highly complex, synchronized pre-game pledge, involving a series of rhythmic claps, a solemn vow to support the team through thick, thin, and questionable refereeing decisions, and the communal consumption of a specific, team-sanctioned brand of suspiciously green fizzy drink. It's called the Quench of Unwavering Quibblers, and it tastes faintly of lime and existential hope. The history of organized sport, of course, predates the widespread commercialization of sports betting by millennia. Ancient folk games, often tied to seasonal rituals or local traditions, were played for community pride, for bragging rights, for the sheer joy of competition. The earliest iterations of modern sports like soccer or baseball in the 19th century were often driven by working-class communities seeking recreation and a sense of local identity, long before multimillion-dollar betting industries grew up around them. Even the ancient Olympic Games, while certainly having instances of wagers among spectators, were primarily focused on religious significance, the pursuit of arete, excellence, and the honor of representing one's city-state. So, this idea of sport without betting isn't entirely alien. It's perhaps a return to or a different evolution from older roots. You even read a quirky tidbit once about a remote island community whose most popular sport involved competitive, acrobatic coconut husking, and where the only betting was on who would tell the most entertaining celebratory story afterwards, the prize being an extra coconut. Simpler times, perhaps. The pre-game buzz in the stadium concourse is thick with analysis and anticipation. Conversations revolve around player form, tactical matchups, the coach's controversial selection for starting lineup, and impassioned relitigations of famous moments from past encounters between these two rival teams. There's a depth of sporting knowledge, a genuine engagement with the nuances of the game itself, that feels uncluttered. The narrative isn't dominated by point spreads or money lines. It's purely about the human drama, the skill, the strategy, the heart. It's rather refreshing, like drinking spring water after a long diet of overly complicated sugary sodas. Though, you reflect, the stadium food still seems engineered to cost approximately the same as a controlling share in a small tech startup, proving that some forms of financial extraction are eternal. As the lights dim further and a roar goes up, signaling the imminent arrival of the athletes, you lean forward, the question still resonating in your mind. What truly makes a game thrilling? Is it simply the inherent uncertainty of the outcome? Is it the breathtaking display of peak human skill and athleticism? Is it the deep emotional investment you have in your chosen team, that irrational but powerful sense of us versus them? Or does it, in fact, require that little extra personal stake, that tiny financial gamble to truly sharpen the edge of every pass, every shot, every crucial moment? The teams emerge onto the field, two brightly clad armies ready for battle, and the stadium erupts in a deafening wave of sound. A pure, unadulterated roar of passion, hope, and fierce loyalty. The weight of expectation from these thousands of fans, a heavy, invisible mantle, settles onto the shoulders of the young athletes below. But it's an expectation untainted by odds or payouts, an expectation for glory, for pride, for the beautiful, unpredictable unfolding of the game they all love. The stage is set, the silent, emotional stakes are incredibly high. Does it still feel thrilling? Oh yes, but how thrilling, and is anything lost or perhaps gained in this wager-free world? That, my friend, is what we're here to find out. The roar of the crowd that greeted the team still echoes in your ears, a wave of pure, unadulterated sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the colossal stadium. The pre-game rituals, the vibrant display of team colors, the almost religious fervor of the fans. It all felt intensely familiar, yet with that subtle, underlying difference you're here to explore. The whistle blows, a sharp, piercing cry that cuts through the anticipation, and the game begins. And as the athletes surge into motion, a blur of speed, skill, and strategic intent, you find yourself leaning forward, your own heart beginning to pound in sync with the rising energy of the arena. The question immediately presents itself. What is this feeling? This captivating, electrifying thrill that holds tens of thousands of people in its thrall, even when there isn't a single cent riding on the outcome. Your eyes follow the intricate dance of the players, the almost telepathic understanding that seems to flow between teammates, the breathtaking displays of individual brilliance. There's an undeniable artistry to it, a beauty in the perfectly executed pass, the gravity-defying leap, the split-second decision that turns the tide of play. You find yourself appreciating the sheer, unadulterated skill on display, the years of dedication and relentless training that have culminated in these moments of peak human performance. It's like watching a troupe of exceptionally athletic ballet dancers who've decided that interpretive dance is best expressed through the medium of aggressively chasing a ball and occasionally falling over in a dramatic, yet strangely elegant, fashion. And then there's the glorious, maddening uncertainty of it all. Even without a betting slip clutched in your hand, the inherent unpredictability of sport is a potent drug. Who will score next? Will that audacious long shot find its mark? Can the underdog defenders hold out against the relentless pressure from the champions? Every moment is pregnant with possibility. Every play a miniature drama unfolding with no pre-written script. This, you realize, is a fundamental part of the thrill, the simple, exhilarating state of not knowing, of being completely immersed in a present moment that could swing in any direction. The fans around you are so emotionally invested in every tackle and pass. You see one particularly dedicated supporter meticulously trying to influence the game by sending very strong telepathic suggestions to their team's goalkeeper, who, to be fair, does seem to be looking a bit more focused, if also slightly confused, as if he suddenly remembered he left the interdimensional oven on. You look around at the faces in the crowd. They are a sea of emotion, hope, anxiety, frustration, elation, all writ large. This is clearly about more than just appreciating skill or enjoying the uncertainty. There's a profound sense of identification here, of belonging. These fans aren't just watching a game. They are participating in a tribal ritual. Their team is an extension of themselves, their community, their identity. A victory for the team is a personal triumph. A loss, a shared sorrow. The concept of ludi, or public games, in ancient Rome, your internal academic, now sporting an imaginary slightly askew toga, explains, was central to civic life. Chariot races, for example, inspired incredibly fierce loyalty to different factions. The greens, the blues, the reds, the whites. Spectators weren't just passively watching. They were passionately, often violently, invested in their chosen team's success, and this fervor had social and even political ramifications, often with little evidence of widespread, formalized individual financial betting as we'd recognize it today. The thrill was in the spectacle, the factional devotion, the visceral experience of the crowd. This stadium, you feel, is a modern echo of that ancient passion, the stakes being emotional, social, and deeply personal. Does this pure excitement feel different? Perhaps. There's a certain lightness to it, an absence of that gnawing, secondary anxiety that can accompany a personal financial wager. The groans of disappointment when you're adopted for the night, purely for observational purposes, of course. Team concedes a point are genuine, but they don't seem to carry that bitter, there goes my rent money undertone. The cheers for a brilliant play are perhaps even more unrestrained, born purely from admiration and shared joy, not relief that your bet is still alive. The only odds being vigorously discussed in the row behind you seem to be the odds of young Timmy successfully managing to balance 3 hot dogs and a giant novelty foam finger without causing a condiment-based international incident. Spoiler, the odds were not in Timmy's favor, much to the amusement of Brenda the Badger, whose furry face on a nearby banner seemed to smirk with silent judgment. You observe some of the fans' rituals. One particularly dedicated group in the section to your right has what appears to be a vow of the incessant optimistic hum. During tense moments, They all close their eyes, link arms, and emit a low, collective hum, presumably designed to generate a powerful field of positive psychic energy, or perhaps just to annoy the fans of the opposing team with its sheer, unwavering monotony. It's a quirky, endearing display of faith. You read once about a peculiar historical fan superstition from early 20th century baseball, where some spectators believed that wearing their hats inside out and backwards during the final innings could magically reverse a losing score. Human beings have an incredible capacity, your internal narrator muses, for creating rituals and symbolic actions to try and influence uncontrollable outcomes or simply to express their hopes and anxieties. Whether these rituals involve financial stakes or purely emotional ones, their psychological function remains remarkably consistent. The fans here are certainly not short on elaborate, if entirely non-monetary, symbolic actions. One gentleman seems to be trying to communicate directly with his team's star forward by using a complex system of semaphore flags, which the forward, understandably focused on not being flattened by a 200-pound defender, appears to be entirely oblivious to. Neuroscientists and sports psychologists, that familiar voice of intellectual curiosity pipes up, clearly intrigued by the raw emotions swirling around you, still debate the precise cocktail of neurochemicals, dopamine, adrenaline, endorphins, even oxytocin from the communal bonding that are released in the brain during peak moments of sports spectatorship. They also explore how these neurochemical responses might differ in their intensity, their triggers, or their overall balance in the absence of the specific reward anticipation pathways that are so powerfully activated by the prospect of a financial win through gambling. It's a fascinating thought. The human brain is clearly getting a powerful hit of something from this experience, even without money on the line. Every near miss, every spectacular save, every surge towards the opponent's goal sends palpable waves of adrenaline and collective gasps or cheers through the crowd. The sheer, unadulterated drama unfolding on the field is a potent stimulant in itself. You see a fan with a homemade sign that simply and beautifully reads, "I am experiencing a significant number of sport-related emotions right now," which you feel perfectly encapsulates the entire stadium's current mood. So that thrilling edge, is it still present? Oh, absolutely. It's there in the knot in your stomach as your adopted team defends a desperate last-minute attack. It's there in the explosion of joy when they execute a brilliant counter-move. It's there in the shared groan of frustration when a seemingly certain goal is narrowly missed. This edge, you're beginning to realize, is not a single, sharp blade honed only by the whetstone of financial risk. It's a multifaceted thing, a serrated collection of different excitements. The thrill of witnessing mastery, the thrill of uncertainty, the thrill of belonging, the thrill of shared emotional catharsis, the thrill of a story unfolding before your very eyes. The most valuable thing being enthusiastically, and somewhat stickily, exchanged between a group of fans next to you isn't a betting slip changing hands after a successful wager, but rather complex, deeply held theories about why the team's third-choice substitute mascot, a slightly bewildered-looking gerbil named Neville, clearly possesses untapped motivational powers that the coach is criminally underutilizing. The game surges on, a vibrant tapestry of human effort, skill, and passion. And as you watch, you become increasingly convinced that the true electricity of spectator sports comes not from what fans stand to win or lose in their wallets, but from what they stand to experience in their hearts, together. The thrilling edge is there, sharp and bright, forged in the pure, unadulterated love of the game itself. The game surges before you, a relentless tide of action, skill, and raw human effort, and you're undeniably caught in its current. The thrill of it all surprisingly potent even without a single wager changing hands. As you continue to observe the unfolding drama on the field, your attention is increasingly drawn to the swirling, roaring ocean of humanity that surrounds you. The fans, their passion, their energy, their sheer, unadulterated investment in every moment is a spectacle in itself, and it forces you to ponder. In a world where the thrill of a financial stake is entirely absent from the equation, what fuels this incredible, unwavering allegiance? How does such pure, untainted team loyalty flourish? You look around and see devotion etched on every face, painted in vibrant team colors across foreheads and cheeks, proclaimed on banners meticulously crafted with more love than artistic skill. This isn't the fleeting interest of someone hoping for a lucky payout. This is deep-rooted, almost familial loyalty. It's the kind of allegiance that's passed down through generations, a birthright as much as a choice. You see grandparents with their grandchildren, all decked out in the same team regalia, the elder patiently explaining the nuances of the game or recounting legends of past glories, the younger soaking it all in with wide-eyed wonder. The roots of fandom here seem to grow in the rich soil of shared history, community identity, and a genuine love for the club or team itself, its players, its style of play, perhaps even its perceived ethos or values. You see one fan meticulously updating a hand-drawn chart that seems to track not player statistics, but their acts of on-field chivalry and moments of unexpected whimsy. It's a different kind of scorecard entirely. How are these allegiances forged in the first place, without the sometimes seductive entry point of betting on a team just to make things more interesting? Perhaps it's geographical, an unbreakable bond with the team that represents your city, your region, your home. Or it's those powerful family traditions, the first game you attended as a child, your hand held tight by a parent whose own heart beat for these same colors. It could be an admiration for a particular star player, not just for their skill, but for their character, their story, their embodiment of certain ideals. Or maybe it's an aesthetic appreciation for a team's unique playing style, the fluid grace of one, the gritty determination of another, the audacious innovation of a third. Without the distorting lens of odds and potential payouts, fans here are free to choose their loyalties based on these more intrinsic, perhaps more meaningful connections. You overhear a passionate debate between two friends, not about which team is the smart money, but about which team's intricate passing formations more closely resemble the elegant, mathematically precise beauty of a flock of migrating swallows. It's a level of aesthetic appreciation you rarely encounter in a typical sports bar back in our own timeline. The expressions of this loyalty are a vibrant, creative, and sometimes gloriously unhinged spectacle. The costumes, as you've noted, are often works of art in themselves, not just replica jerseys, but full-body creations, elaborate headdresses, walking embodiments of team mascots or historical figures. One particularly dedicated individual near you appears to be dressed as a full-scale, historically accurate, or at least enthusiastic siege trebuchet, complete with, thankfully non-functional, an arm that occasionally flings a soft team-colored plush toy into the crowd with a surprising degree of accuracy. The banners are not just proclaiming team names, but often feature intricate hand-stitched poetry, philosophical musings on the nature of sport, or surprisingly good caricatures of the opposing team's most annoying players. The chants and songs are complex, multi-layered affairs, rich with local history, inside jokes, and vocal harmonies that would put a medieval monastery choir to shame. You attempt to join in one particularly rousing anthem that seems to have at least 17 verses, a bridge in a minor key, and a surprise kazoo solo, but you mostly just end up mouthing along enthusiastically, hoping your sheer goodwill makes up for your complete lack of melodic coordination. The development of deeply ingrained fan loyalties and distinct club cultures has a long and fascinating history, often predating the era of widespread commercialized sports betting. Your internal academic, now perhaps wearing a vintage football rosette, explains. In 19th century Britain, for instance, many early football clubs were formed around local workplaces, churches, or pubs, fostering intense community bonds and fierce local rivalries that were based purely on geographic identity and a shared passion for the game. Similarly, the annual boat race between Oxford and Cambridge universities, which began in 1829, ignited a partisan fervor among students and alumni that had absolutely nothing to do with betting odds and everything to do with academic pride and institutional rivalry. This alternate world's fandom feels like a direct, amplified descendant of that kind of pure, place-based, identity-driven passion. What about the fair-weather fan? That familiar figure who only shows up when a team is winning. Do they exist here? Perhaps, but their motivations would be different. They wouldn't be chasing a winning streak to make a quick buck. Instead, they might be drawn to the pure, uncomplicated joy of associating with success, the reflected glory of a champion team, or simply the vibrant atmosphere of a stadium full of happy, celebrating people. Their allegiance might be shallower, but it's not tainted by financial opportunism. You spot someone who is enthusiastically waving flags for both teams, explaining to anyone who'll listen that they're just here for the sheer, unadulterated spectacle of peak human endeavor, and also the rather excellent artisanal churros at Stand 3B. A purist of a different kind, perhaps. You hear a quirky local story about the initiation rites for joining one of the city's most dedicated fan clubs, the Order of the Ever-Hopeful Badger. Apparently, prospective members must not only demonstrate an encyclopedic knowledge of the team's history, including the middle names of every player from the legendary 1973 squad and the exact recipe for the then-coach's famous pre-game pep talk muffins, but also take a solemn vow to never, under any circumstances, wear the colors of their arch-rivals, the perfidious puce pigeons, not even if all their other clothes are simultaneously and inexplicably devoured by a flock of unusually discerning moths. The penalty for breaking this vow, it is whispered, involves having to listen to a continuous loop of the pigeons' deeply underwhelming victory anthem for 24 hours. A fate worse than, well, almost anything. Social identity theorists and sports historians, that familiar voice of intellectual inquiry chimes in, still debate the precise alchemy of modern fan allegiance. Is its often startling intensity primarily a product of innate human tribalism and our deep-seated psychological need for belonging and differentiation from outgroups? Or has it been significantly amplified, shaped, and perhaps even manufactured by decades of pervasive media narratives, sophisticated commercial branding strategies, and, in many contemporary contexts, the added emotional accelerant provided by the accessibility and normalization of sports gambling? In this stadium, devoid of that last factor, the tribalism and need for belonging certainly feel like powerful, undiluted forces. The emotional roller coaster of the game, the soaring hope, the crushing despair, the nail-biting tension, the explosive joy is experienced directly, unfiltered by the secondary anxiety of a winning or losing bet. It's a rawer, perhaps more purely communal, emotional experience. The connection between players and fans might also take on a different quality. When fans aren't scrutinizing individual player performances through the lens of how it might affect their parlays or fantasy league standings, which, in this world, if they exist, would be based purely on skill prediction, not monetary wagers. Perhaps there's room for a more straightforward appreciation of their effort, their talent, their human triumphs and failings. The players are heroes, or sometimes tragic figures, in a purely sporting drama, not cogs in a vast, unpredictable financial machine. The only insider trading you're likely to encounter here is someone excitedly whispering a hot tip that the team's star striker secretly prefers kitten videos to puppy videos, a piece of information that will no doubt fuel intense debate amongst the fan club's player personality analysis subcommittee. Interfan rivalry, of course, is still very much alive and kicking. The banter is fierce, the chants are pointed, the displays of one-upmanship in banner size and costume creativity are truly something to behold. But the core of the rivalry seems to stem from pure sporting pride, historical grievances. That disallowed goal in the '87 semifinal still stings, apparently, and deeply held beliefs about the inherent superiority of one's own team's mascot/philosophy/choice of halftime orange slices. It's passionate, it's often hilariously over the top, but it doesn't seem to carry that same undercurrent of financial antagonism that can sometimes sour betting-fueled rivalries. The most aggressive confrontation you witness involves two fans from opposing teams engaging in a surprisingly vigorous, synchronized eye-rolling competition whenever the referee makes a questionable call. In this world, you realize fan allegiance is a powerful, undiluted force, a vibrant testament to the human capacity for passionate, unmercenary devotion. It's a love affair with a team, a city, a shared dream, a commitment to a collective identity that finds its most exuberant expression in the roaring, colorful, beautifully irrational theater of the sports stadium. The thrill is real, the passion is profound, and it all flourishes wonderfully without a single bet being placed, proving that the human heart, when it truly loves a game, needs no other stake than its own emotional investment. The roar of the crowd, that wave of pure, unadulterated passion you witnessed in the last section, still hangs heavy and electric in the stadium air. Their allegiance, untainted by the prospect of financial gain or loss, is a powerful, almost elemental force. But now, as the game unfolds with its captivating rhythm of skill, strategy, and sudden, breathtaking turns. Your focus shifts from the stands to the figures on the field itself, the athletes. In this world where sports and wagering have never held hands, where the only odds are the inherent uncertainties of human competition, how does this affect the players? Does their focus sharpen? Their integrity shine brighter? When the corrupting shadow of betting is entirely absent, you watch them move, a blur of motion, a symphony of muscle and mind working in concert. There's an intensity in their eyes, a fierce concentration that speaks of years of dedication, of sacrifices made in pursuit of this very moment. But you can't help but wonder what's not there. There's no subtle, gnawing pressure from shadowy gambling syndicates looking to influence an outcome. There's no temptation, however remote, for a struggling player to consider throwing a match for a desperate, illicit payday. The sports pages in this reality, you imagine, are refreshingly devoid of those grim headlines about match-fixing scandals or players suspended for betting on their own games. The only fixing happening here is when the team's equipment manager meticulously fixes a player's torn jersey with a needle and thread, possibly while humming a jaunty, team-approved sea shanty. Does this absence of betting-related pressures translate to a purer form of play? It's a compelling thought. Imagine athletes stepping onto the field with their minds solely focused on the game, on their teammates, on the pursuit of victory for its own sake, for the honor of their colors, for the roar of those devoted, non-betting fans. There's no need to worry if their performance will cover the spread. No fear that a missed shot or a dropped pass will unleash a torrent of abuse from disgruntled gamblers who lost money on them. Their successes are purely their own. Their failures, too, are theirs to analyze and learn from, unclouded by external financial implications. You see a star player make an uncharacteristic, almost comical error, and the crowd groans in shared disappointment. But there's no angry muttering about suspicious betting patterns. Instead, the commentators sympathetically suggest he might have simply had one too many of those surprisingly potent artisanal guava and turnip smoothies at the pregame brunch. This potential for a higher baseline of integrity is fascinating. When an athlete's every move isn't being scrutinized for its potential impact on betting markets, perhaps there's more room for sportsmanship, for genuine displays of fair play, for a focus on the spirit, rather than just the letter of the law. Errors are seen as human fallibility, part of the unpredictable drama of sport, rather than potential evidence of something more sinister. The history of professional sport in our own timeline is sadly punctuated by numerous gambling-related scandals. Your internal academic, now perhaps leafing through a well-worn copy of famous sporting controversies I have known and secretly judged, remarks. The Black Sox scandal of 1919 in American baseball, where members of the Chicago White Sox were accused of intentionally losing the World Series in exchange for payments from gamblers, remains a stark cautionary tale. Similar incidents have plagued soccer, cricket, and many other sports globally, often casting a long shadow over genuine athletic achievement. In this alternate reality, such shadows are conspicuously absent, allowing the achievements on the field to shine with their own unblemished light. What, then, becomes the primary motivator for these athletes, beyond the presumably still substantial, though perhaps differently structured paycheck? It's likely a potent cocktail of intrinsic drives. The pure love of their chosen sport, the relentless pursuit of personal excellence, the thrill of competition at the highest level, the fame and admiration that come with being a sporting hero, the profound sense of responsibility in representing their community or even their nation. These are the motivations that fuel the endless hours of training, the pushing of physical and mental limits, the dedication to mastering one's craft. You watch a young player, clearly a rising star, execute a move of such audacious skill and creativity that the entire stadium erupts in a spontaneous ovation. The look on their face is not one of calculating odds, but of pure, unadulterated joy in their own extraordinary ability. Their pregame ritual, you hear whispered, doesn't involve lucky charms or specific betting superstitions, but rather a quiet 10-minute consultation with a very wise, very old, and surprisingly opinionated tortoise named Bartholomew, who apparently offers surprisingly insightful tactical advice, mostly involving the strategic benefits of slow and steady, unless, of course, a really fast bid is required, in which case, be fast. you come across a quirky historical tidbit about the ancient Olympic Games. Athletes participating in those games took a solemn oath before a statue of Zeus, swearing to compete fairly and abide by the rules. While the enforcement mechanisms were, shall we say, a tad more direct and divinely intimidating than modern sports tribunals, think thunderbolts for unsportsmanlike conduct, the emphasis was on honor and sacred duty. Perhaps in this wager-free world, athletes take a similar oath of sporting purity, a public pledge to uphold the integrity of their sport with bizarre, symbolic, and hopefully entirely non-divine retribution-based penalties for anyone caught, say, using an illegally springy shoelace for an unfair advantage in the pre-game synchronized high-fiving competition. Sports ethicists and sociologists, that familiar voice of scholarly inquiry pipes up, clearly having finished its imaginary string cheese and now ready for serious debate, still grapple with identifying the primary threats to sporting integrity in the modern era. While illicit gambling activities are often cited as a major corrupting influence, some argue that the immense commercial pressures inherent in professional sport itself, multi-million-dollar sponsorships, lucrative media rights deals, inflated player salaries, and the relentless win-at-all-costs mentality, can also create a complex web of motivations and vulnerabilities that may compromise fair play, irrespective of betting. It's a compelling point. Perhaps this alternate reality, while free of gambling-specific corruptions, still has its own unique pressures on athletes, born from the sheer scale of its entertainment industry. However, the absence of that direct, often insidious, link to betting outcomes does seem to create a different, perhaps cleaner, psychological space for the athletes to inhabit. You can't help but feel that the team sports psychologist probably has a slightly less stress-inducing job in this reality, not having to counsel players who've received death threats from fans whose $5 accumulator bet just went down in flames because of a missed free throw. Consider how athletes handle an off day here. When a star player has a terrible game, when their usually unerring skill deserts them, how is it perceived by the fans, the media, and indeed by the player themselves? Without the cynical, ever-present suspicion that they might be on the take or not trying to cover the spread, perhaps there's more room for understanding human fallibility. The narrative can focus on genuine sporting reasons, a nagging injury, a brilliant tactical outmaneuvering by the opposition, or simply one of those inexplicable days when nothing goes right. The post-game press conferences might be refreshingly, if sometimes brutally, honest. Yes, I had a shocker out there today. Turns out, despite appearances, I am, in fact, a fallible human being and not a perfectly calibrated, error-free sporting automaton from the future. My sincerest apologies to the laws of physics, which I appeared to be actively defying, and not in a good way. In this wager-free world, the athletes on the field seem to carry themselves with a different kind of weight, a different kind of freedom. Their triumphs feel entirely their own, born of their talent and toil. Their failures, too, are theirs to bear and learn from, without the added burden of having let down the betters. They are simply and profoundly engaged in the pure pursuit of their sport, their skills and passions laid bare for all to see, their integrity hopefully shining with an unclouded, uncomplicated brilliance in these grand arenas of human endeavor. The roar of the stadium, the sight of athletes performing feats of incredible skill untainted by the shadow of gambling, the pure, unadulterated passion of the fans. It all paints a vivid picture of a sporting world with a distinctly different flavor. But as the game continues its thrilling, unpredictable dance on the field below, you find your attention drifting towards another crucial element of the modern sporting experience: the media. How do the newspapers, the television broadcasts, the myriad online platforms that dissect and celebrate sport in our own world function here, in this reality where betting lines, point spreads, and gambling odds are entirely absent from the lexicon? How do they craft drama, predict outcomes, and keep fans engaged without that ever-present undercurrent of wagering? You imagine picking up the sports section of a local newspaper, a charmingly retro act in itself. Perhaps this world still cherishes the tactile joy of newsprint, or maybe it's just a very sophisticated e-paper that feels like newsprint and occasionally emits the faint, nostalgic scent of ink. The headlines blaze with dramatic accounts of last night's games, but the language is different. Instead of "Team A crushes spread, delights bettors," or "Shock upset defies 10-1 odds," you might read something like Hometown heroes clinch victory in stunning display of tactical brilliance, or underdogs triumph through sheer grit and unwavering team spirit. The focus, you realize, is entirely on the human element, the skill, the strategy, the emotion, the narrative of the game itself. You flip to the previews for upcoming matches. There are no betting lines prominently displayed, no expert tipsters offering their guaranteed locks. Instead, you find in-depth tactical analyses, detailed breakdowns of player form and fitness, thoughtful explorations of historical rivalries, and insightful discussions about the psychological factors that might influence the outcome. Predictions, when offered, are based on the reasoned opinions of seasoned sports journalists and former players, grounded in their deep understanding of the game, not on the fluctuating whims of a betting market. The sports talk shows on the local vidscreen must be incredibly highbrow, you muse, with retired athletes and tweed-jacketed academics passionately debating the socio-philosophical implications of a particularly aggressive full-court press, or the subtle Freudian symbolism inherent in a coach's halftime motivational speech involving a rubber chicken and a surprisingly detailed map of Tasmania. How, then, does the sports media in this world craft that compelling drama, that sense of urgency and high stakes that keeps fans hooked? They do it by becoming master storytellers. They delve deep into the human interest stories behind the athletes, their arduous journeys to the top, their personal struggles and triumphs, their connections to their communities. They build up rivalries not just as contests between two teams, but as epic sagas with heroes, villains, of a purely sporting, pantomime variety, of course, and long-simmering historical grievances. They focus on the sheer artistry and intellectual complexity of the sport, breaking down plays with the same meticulous attention to detail that an art critic might bring to a Renaissance masterpiece or a musicologist to a complex symphony. The season itself becomes a grand, unfolding narrative, full of unexpected plot twists, character development, and the eternal hope for a satisfying, or at least dramatically resonant, denouement. Instead of a chief betting analyst, each major sports network here probably employs a chief vibes officer, a very intuitive individual whose job it is to assess the collective aura of a team during their warm-up drills and predict the game's outcome based on whether their socks appear to be radiating sufficiently victorious energy. This emphasis on narrative and the human element isn't without historical precedent. Consider the golden age of sports writing in America during the early to mid-20th century. Your internal academic, now perhaps sporting a fedora with a tiny press card tucked into its band, explains. Writers like Grantland Rice, Ring Lardner, or Damon Runyon often employed a highly literary, almost mythic style, crafting heroic narratives around sports figures, focusing on their personalities, their struggles, and the inherent drama of competition. While informal betting certainly existed, the primary public discourse, as shaped by these influential writers, was often more about the romance and heroism of sport than the cold calculus of odds. Even further back, the ancient Greek poet Pindar composed magnificent odes celebrating Olympic victors, focusing not on any wagers they might have inspired, but on their glory, their lineage, their physical prowess, and the divine favor that seemingly shone upon them. This alternate world sports media seems to have taken that Pindaric spirit and run with it, possibly while also live-tweeting the experience with very poetic, if slightly anachronistic, hashtags. During the live broadcast of the game you're watching, the commentary is a revelation. The announcers are articulate, insightful, their voices alive with genuine passion for the sport. They dissect plays with surgical precision, explain complex strategies in accessible terms, and highlight moments of extraordinary skill or athleticism. There are no distracting graphics showing shifting betting lines, no awkward mentions of how a particular player's performance might be affecting prop bets or fantasy league outcomes. Though fantasy leagues here, you imagine, would be purely skill-based prediction games, with the grand prize being eternal bragging rights and perhaps a very nice hat. The focus remains resolutely on the action on the field, on the human drama unfolding between the lines. When a controversial call is made by an official, the ensuing discussion is about the interpretation of the rules, the impact on the game's momentum, the emotional reaction of the players and coaches, not about how many bettors just had their parlays go up in smoke. It's quite refreshing, actually. You find yourself understanding the subtle intricacies of this particular sport better than ever before. You hear about a quirky, wildly popular sports analysis show in this reality called Cosmic Kickoff, where the panel of experts includes not only former players and coaches, but also a certified astrostrategist who predicts game outcomes based on the precise alignment of celestial bodies relative to each team's home stadium, and a sports psychologist who specializes in interpreting the pre-game dreams of particularly influential team mascots. Brenda the Badger, the astrostrategist, might declare with grave authority, dreamt of chasing a particularly agile butterfly through a field of four-leaf clovers while Saturn was in retrograde. This clearly indicates a strong offensive showing in the first half, but a potential vulnerability to counterattacks involving unexpected gusts of wind in the final quarter. It sounds utterly bonkers, yet somehow charmingly in keeping with a world that embraces such diverse forms of imaginative entertainment. Media theorists and communication scholars, that familiar voice of intellectual rigor chimes in, adjusting its metaphorical spectacles, still engage in robust debate regarding the extent to which sports media merely reflects existing public interest and the inherent drama of athletic competition, versus the degree to which it actively constructs narratives, manufactures rivalries, and shapes fan perceptions and emotional investment, particularly in how it frames concepts of success, failure, and the overarching importance of specific sporting events within the cultural landscape. In this wager-free environment, the media's role as a storyteller, as a shaper of meaning around the raw material of the game, seems even more crucial, more pronounced. They are not just reporting scores, they are weaving legends. You see a sports headline on a nearby screen. Local heroes snatch victory from jaws of almost certain mediocrity through sheer force of will and possibly a pact with a minor, but surprisingly influential weather deity. It has a certain flair that team wins, bettors rejoice just can't match. The post-game analysis is equally focused. Instead of dissecting bad beats or how the final score affected the over-under, pundits break down the key moments of skill, the pivotal strategic decisions, the turning points in the game that were born from human effort or error. Player interviews focus on their experiences, their emotions, their thoughts on the game, not on how they feel about letting down those who wagered on them. It's possible that this type of coverage leads to a more knowledgeable, more analytically astute fan base, one that appreciates the deeper intricacies of the sport itself, rather than just the binary outcome of a bet. The expert here isn't someone who can predict point spreads with uncanny accuracy, but someone who can articulate the beautiful, complex, often heartbreaking, human drama that unfolds on the field of play. The pre-game predictions you see on another channel are wonderfully, almost poetically vague. Team A exhibits a robust probability of engaging in athletic actions with considerable elan, while their opponents, Team B, are strongly anticipated to also participate in the aforementioned sporting contest with noteworthy levels of perspiration and grit. You can't argue with that. In this world without wagers, sports media has to work a little harder, dig a little deeper, and create its narratives from the pure, unadulterated essence of human competition, skill, passion, and drama. And you know what? It's incredibly compelling. It proves that the thrilling edge of sport, the stories that keep us glued to our seats, don't need the artificial spice of betting odds to be utterly captivating. The human heart, it seems, is more than capable of finding all the stakes it needs in the game itself. The intricate ballet of skill and strategy unfolds on the floodlit field before you, the passion of the wager-free crowd a constant, roaring symphony in your ears. You've begun to understand how sports excitement can thrive, raw and potent, even without the spice of financial bets. But now, as you settle deeper into the rhythm of this particular championship game, a classic sporting narrative begins to emerge, one that always holds a special kind of magic, regardless of the reality you inhabit: the tale of the underdog. One team, the reigning champions, all sleek confidence and practiced precision, clearly holds the historical advantage, the perceived superiority in talent and resources. The other, a scrappy, less fancied contender, carries the weight of low expectations, but also, you sense, a fierce, almost defiant spark of hope. In a world without betting odds to quantify their improbability, how does the triumph of such an unbettable underdog resonate?